founder and director of Blindspot Gallery. We also have Venus Lau, curator and writer. She's also artistic director of OCT Contemporary Art Triennale. And our panelist is Ms. Vivienne Chow, who I'm sure a lot of us have read her article or having been interviewed by her before. She's been with SCMP in Hong Kong for over 15 years, a very well-known and very experienced writer of the arts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a nice lunch. Thank you for coming over here to listen to us this Saturday afternoon. And thank you, Angela, for the introduction. So today's discussion, this panel, Making Great Exhibitions Happen. So before going into this discussion, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce, to talk about a bit about themselves and talk about the shows that they have done, because I don't think everyone has been to all of their shows. So I think it's good to for our panelists to talk about some of the works that they have done first before we go into a discussion. So should we have Inti first?
Does this work? Yeah. You hear me well, right? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and to the audience gathered here. I wrote a little bit of just 3 pages in very big font, because it was a long night yesterday, so I hope to organize my thoughts through here. So I will read, but it's very, very casual. So thank you to Asia Society for hosting us in this, as always, incredible venue, and especially to the Hong Kong Art Gallery Week organizers, Katie, Adriana, and Christine, for the invitation, but especially for your hours of work and persistence on enriching the larger cultural community of the city, whose citizens are, with your programs, encountering an intense program of outside the Art Basel schedule. And I think that's very important, because you're really contributing to a public discourse, and especially with this symposium, from your position as gallerist and dealers, and really helping to build a culture of visiting galleries, not only in one specific time of the year, but something that kind of should become a weekly ritual for many. So, okay, so as I speak, I'm just going to have a slideshow of images from the Art Tunes series by the New York-based artist Pablo Helguera. And I'm going to change a little bit of the protocol, and Vivienne might not like me, but I'm not going to show you images of exhibitions that I've made. And instead, this will be a background image while I talk. This cartoons came to my mind when thinking on the word great in the title of our panel, how to make great exhibitions happen, and how it might be perceived by some people as part of our general successful culture and the ideology of happiness, the idea of greatness. When people ask you casually, how are you? Sometimes you just say immediately, everything's great. Well, when things might not be great. So we're in this panel with incredible colleagues under this very interesting title. And over the past weeks, I've been thinking many times, what should I share with you today? As on one hand, my modesty still bans me from self-branding the exhibitions I curate as great. And on the other hand, the how to make them happen, which is part of the title, also makes me think that some people in the floor might be here, perhaps, I don't know, waiting to get some answers, some clues, come out with some strategies, some tools, some mechanisms on how to make great exhibitions. The thing is, and this is my own perspective, in exhibition making or curating, there isn't one single rule to make things happen, let alone make them be great for a given community. Often when I teach postgraduate curatorial studies students, we come to a point that we discuss how, for every single project, one does or one always has to build up a different ethics, because there are many realities, contexts, and art worlds with S in this ecology we can for today call contemporary art. To be more clear, one has to always invent a different ethics and way of working if one is making an exhibition, for example, at a public institution in mainland China, or an exhibition at an art center run under a Jesuit university in Manila. I'm just bringing this because I'm now co-curating a show that is in a museum that is run by a Jesuit university in Manila. And what are the ethics and ways of working in that specific reality? Or being commissioned a curated show at a commercial gallery at the Petter Building, or in another space, or a curatorial research-based project at a non-profit art space, an art fair, a specific section of that art fair, an acquisition committee of a museum with public funds or private funds, or a symposium such as this one. One should always think of why, how, and for whom are we doing this. Now, I'm going to say this again, the why, the how, and for whom, because this is precisely the name of a curatorial collective that I personally think make great exhibitions. And it's a curatorial collective from Zagreb, which are better known as WHW, for why, how, and for whom. And I just suggest this. That's for you to check their work. Now, I describe these different possibilities in our field because I personally work in different scales. In Hong Kong, I have a very small nonprofit art space in Taiwan, which is only 15 minutes walk from my house, where we curate exhibitions that are related to narratives that happen in the immediate context. And I could simultaneously be curating research-based exhibition at a museum in public museum in Brazil, or since January, being part of the acquisition committee for Latin American art at the Tate. And all of these different hats require different ethics, and they require different mechanisms and different tools, yet what's important is not to see them hierarchically. I only have 2 pages. Yeah. So, although at the beginning of my intervention here, I might have sounded critical towards the use of the word great in our contemporary culture of success and the ideology of happiness, I do personally believe that there were and there are great exhibitions out there, and great artists and great curators. In many cases, we might coincide within colleagues on which of, or though, sorry, in many cases, we might coincide within colleagues on which are those great exhibitions and what are those great works and great people who are part of them and make them happen. But what is really great of our field is that each of one of us has our own references, our own mentors, our own great exhibitions. Some of them which we have seen in person, others, or most of them, which we haven't visited at all, but we only know through images. For people who studied with 35 millimeter slides art history, we know exhibitions only through a classroom, through word of mouth, and therefore we mythologize these great exhibitions. So to end with a very banal exercise and to share with you just a little bit of who I personally find great and the great exhibitions that I encourage you, two exhibitions that I encourage you to research and revise during your own time. Here are just two examples, which I guess in the panel discussion we can talk more about it, or you tell me if I still have time. Do I? No. Oh, okay. You stop me, okay? You give me a sign of when to, okay? And yeah, so of course, we're here and we want to share, because symposiums are about that. And as I've said, each of us have our own references and our own great exhibitions, no? And these are two that came to my mind. One example of an exhibition that I physically visited in 2008, the Manifesta exhibition curated by Ansel Frank. For those people who are not familiar with the Manifesta, it's this biennial in Europe that happens every 2 years like any other biennial, but the location of the city in Europe changes in every version. So this one was in the area between Italy and Austria, and Ansel Frank and Gila Peleg curated the exhibition in Trento, and their whole exhibition was based on the Council of Trento in the 16th century, which was the counter-reform proposition that basically changed the idea of confession in Catholicism. And they took this historical moment as a way to connect how the Council of Trento created like a psychological subjectivity for individuals, because people started to relate the idea of confessing as a way of encountering their interiority. No? And again, we're in a symposium with many information, but I bring this just to encourage you to see it. And the other one is a historical biennial from 1998 that it has become kind of like a personal reference of understanding how an exhibition can relate to art history and contemporary practice. But I think we can talk about it later in the panel. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Inti. And so can we have Mimi now to share with us her experience?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mimi. Angela has already introduced me. Sorry. I also have a note with very small font, so I'm not going to read it. So I've seen lots of galleries sitting here. So like many gallerists, as a business owner, as a director, as a curator of exhibitions at a commercial galleries, we often need to try to find a balance between commercial potential of the exhibition as well as its academic and intellectual value. So like Inti, I also have questions to ask myself when I curate or organize an exhibition. I have the 5 W. Why, when, what, who, why, when, what, who, at what.
That sounds like a journalist.
At what cost? Before we came onto the stage, I and Inti talked about the theme of this talk, the making of great exhibitions. But I guess the fundamental question is, what is great exhibition? So to us, as a gallerist, a great exhibition is one with meaning, one that inspires thinking, one that bring about discussion at an affordable cost. So I'm not going to share self-branding, right? You used the word self-brand, the exhibitions at Blindspot, but perhaps I can share a few relatively memorable exhibitions with you because of the process of the making of the exhibition. I just made this PowerPoint 5 minutes ago. Okay, so one of a permanent instant photography from 1980s to 2000s by Hong Kong artists is one of the group exhibitions we stage at Blindspot Gallery. Sorry, which button do you push? So our program consists of an equal mixture of thematic group exhibitions and solo exhibitions. So this exhibition features over 80 works by 13 Japanese artists. Oh, sorry. The exhibition explores the concept of eroticism and its prevalent presence in Japanese photography. This is a permanent instant photography from 1980s to year 2000 by 10 Hong Kong artists. Because of the lack of archive and documentation of art practice in Hong Kong, a primary part of the research of this exhibition is based on interviews with artists and academics. And then this is the other group exhibitions we staged earlier this year, Shikijo, Eroticism in Japanese Photography, featuring 13 Japanese artists from the well-established and well-known Araki Nobuyashi, Daido Moriyama, to the less-known emerging artists, for example, Sakiko Nomura and Daisuke Yokata. So exhibitions like this usually involve lots of resources and time and effort, and quite often the commercial return doesn't justify it. But the primary reason we organize exhibition as such is out of an interest and curiosity to explore the subject matter. Despite critical acclaim, we don't usually get lots of traffic to this exhibition. With solo exhibitions, for example, this one titled Museum of the Lost, and solo exhibition of Hong Kong artists Leung Chi-wo and Sarah Wong, we usually give the artists full control, depending on their practice and the style of their work. So in this exhibition, Warren and Sarah took over the space, and they decide the layout of the work, the selection of the work. This is it. So I guess this concludes the exhibitions we staged at Blindspot. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. And last but not least, Venus, please.
I have to confess that I think my eyes are bad that I only saw like making exhibitions happen, and then I didn't see the great part. So like I have to like, and then like I was told that like you guys like the panelists should like talk a little bit about what they did past, and I'm very obedient and I did that. I'm not self-obsessed. I'm not self-renting, and also I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I did in the past 2 years, I think, because most of them are not, they did not take place in Hong Kong. So maybe it's good to talk a little bit about that. So like last year, I did a exhibition series comprised of 3 solo exhibitions by Ming Wong, Corporate Aruna Nonchai, and Hei Gu Yang, at the Olin Center that I'm sure that some people are really concerned about what they're going on now. But and we'll know about it soon, but it doesn't matter. But actually these three shows, like when we started like doing the press conference and all that, and people asked like, oh, is it about like Asian identity? Because the 3 artists are all Asian artists who were educated and also like now kind of like half based or like 100% based in Berlin or New York or other places. So I do think that like when we try to like talk about this show to other people, it's important to steer a little bit away from the like East-West self-other dualism. So that's why I picked time zones. And it's like we talk about globalization a lot in every panel and at a lot of panels, like, and then like talk about is globalized like capital kind of making the art world like seamless merge to each other, which is not. Like doing shows in Hong Kong and in New York and Beijing is like totally different stories. But what is actually homogenized is actually time, especially in the art world. It's just like we go to the same art fairs, biennials, do Skype meetings all the time, no matter what time zones are we in. So the show, like the series, is a little bit about like how do we think about alternative temporality through. So this is the first show that started like this whole series, and this is Ming Wang's show. So basically, the three shows like happens in the same two spaces. One is the nave, which is like a big passage, and the other one is like the central gallery, which is like a smaller enclosed space. So Ming, you can see like in the nave, like Ming shows a big installation. Basically, it's an extension of his ongoing research on the modernization of Cantonese opera, and also his research on science fiction in the past decades. So it's just like there are different timelines that are totally out of joint. So we actually like got like the Beijing opera. There's the set factories to do these things for him, and then also like we made like last year in Marienbad in Shanghai. So in the French concession actually. So I mean there are like a lot of different timelines in this thing that we call spectral time because it's totally out of joint. And the second show like that we do is with this Thai artist who's based in New York that work very closely with pop culture. But usually in the contemporary art history, like working with pop culture is like basically a very critical stance, like, like from the Campbell Soup or like Can, and then like to Jeff Koons stuff. It's like always about like how to criticize the consumerism and all that. But instead of this, he worked very closely with the system that creates pop culture, like including like, the sets, like he worked very closely like with the HBA people, like the Hood Buyer people on like how on a lot of videos and all that. So it is like a lot about like the pop culture time, like which almost a zombie time that when you listen to a song that it never gets away and keeps repeating and open a new effective space. So this is part of it, plus, the screening of the other things. And the third one is the Haeguyang solo show, which is, so there is, on one hand, it's like the very airy space of a new soloist-inspired installation, and then like a dark room of his other works that she actually named the room like it's the Golden Crow and the Jade Rabbit, because like she wanted this dark room to be like, because like in the East Asian mythology, like most like in Korea and in China, like we believe that like Asian people believe that there's like rabbits living on the moon, actually using an animal image to animate the otherness or authority. So she's very into this like mystical like room with like totemic structures on that. So this is the series, and this is another more recent show that I did at OCAT Shenzhen, which is my home institution that I'm working now. This show shows like works from mid-90s to now, like by Chinese artists whose works are related to land, and as like in the concept of like land as an administrative concept. Rather than like compared to the 60s and 70s when Walter de Maria or like Robert Smithson doing when they do land art is pointing to a nowhere. Because like in China, basically like there's nowhere. I mean, basically we don't have nowhere anymore because it's all covered by Google Earth. It's all covered by the satellites. It's all like covered by like different surveillance system. And then in China, whenever you do everything, you don't own the land, you're leasing from the government for maximum 70 years. So this show is more like, on one hand, showing all these like land-related works, and because the land is a very fluid concept sometimes, even when it's like inscribed very rigidly in laws in a certain place. And at the same time, it's like, because when people look at the works images, they said that, oh, it must be a Chinese version of land art, which we can encounter a lot. It's like whenever you show a Chinese artist or non-Western artist, oh, it's like a Chinese version of blah, 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 like in Armory in 2 years ago. And then like when Xu Zhen's works were shown there, I'm just like, oh, this is a Chinese Catalan. And then it makes it very hard to do shows like with non-Western artists or the non-international artists. So this is like this, the soil is the work by Zheng Guogu, who is in Yangjiang. It's like, actually he has this ongoing project of the Age of the Empire. It's changed to another name now, that he bought a huge piece of land in his hometown and developed it based on the game, The Age of the Empire. So it's just like what, and then like, it doesn't matter, I mean, it's still ongoing, but it really doesn't matter if what it will be at the end, because what is interesting is like how he look or like dig into the gray area of land, because a lot of the developments is actually like barely legal. And then he paid a fine and then he would keep doing that. So that is the demarcation of like what is legal and what is land in China. And this work, like these halls and this room, is one work by Colin Chinnery and also Liu Wei. So it's this like reenactment of their 2007 project that they turn random Taoist ritual into like geometric shapes and dig into like the original version is 798, which is like administrated by the 798 administration, whatever, like that is like the direct government office from the Chaoyang district of Beijing, and also the landlord. So the whole thing, like that looks like kind of poetic and religious and all that, but it involves a lot of bureaucratic traces in this work. Is it 5 minutes? It's gone. Should I just go very fast? And these are the other works, and including Taipei's Army City. And this is a show that we just closed like, with people that Adrian Wong that we're familiar with, John Raffman that we're kind of familiar with, and then also about like the Summer Triangle and how the concept of constellation built a totality of a show.
Okay, thank you, Venus. I think we're running a bit of time, so we can start a discussion now. As a writer, I always get this comment from people wherever they are, wherever I go. I have this great show. Why don't you write about it? I really don't know what to say sometimes. So, but I would like to ask, to go back to Mimi's point, I think let's go back to basics. How do you define a great exhibition? So from curators, artists' perspective, the definition could be very different from the audience's perspective, like the point that you made about this one show, the traffic and the critical acclaim. They did not seem to be proportional. So how do you? So what is your? I think we should try to define the great exhibition. So what's more important, to have a show that you can really engage an audience, or to push the artistic excellence, even though you might have to lose some audience? So how do you find a balance?
I also ask myself that questions every day. I guess some of our exhibitions are more educational and informative. Some carries a certain level of historical significance, such as the Polaroid show from 1980s. Some shows are just more personal and hopefully thought-provoking. So when I organize an exhibition, I don't necessarily think directly about the target audience. I guess there's a freedom a commercial gallery has. You know, we don't really have a mission. Well, we have a mission. You know, we have a positioning. However, we, unlike a public institution or a museum, we don't have the burden to fulfill certain responsibility. We do offer lots of guided tours to students and to different groups. But then I guess we have, you know, I don't really think what kind of audience I want to engage. I think our different shows engage different types of audience.
What about you, Inti?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would insist that the great thing of the field itself is, again, this different references that each of us in the room have and we share, but not to make it so much about relativism. Yeah, more thinking about why those two shows that I just suggested at the very end, why do I think that they're great? Just to answer very directly. I do personally have an inclination for exhibitions that are based on historical processes. No? Again, that's one direction. People can are more enthusiastic about you know, geometric abstraction, and that's valuable. No, there's not I don't think there's a hierarchy of greatness. No, there's great geometric abstraction exhibition as there are great essayistic, historical based exhibitions. No? So the two that I gave, well, it might be also a bit, well, not confusing, but also I don't want to suggest that great exhibitions are only biennial exhibitions. No, I put two biennials because maybe as being a curator, you tend to visit biennials and they really become like source books. And these two are great because they have worked until now for my own processes as those source books. Like I remember works that I saw on those, well, in the case of Manifesta, or I start associating artworks in relation to how I read about how the Sao Paulo Biennial of 1998 associated the work of Francis Bacon with the work of a contemporary artist from Brazil, and how modern art can be next to a younger artistic production. And that's somehow how I became affiliated with that kind of practice, and those specific exhibitions that I mentioned became, like the source books. And in terms of audience, I like very much what you said about when I suggested the why, how, and for whom, that you added more and more, and to what cost, no? And in relation to, the thing is that it's so complex. There's so many agents that are part of the experience of the exhibition. I was trained as a museum guide for many years. Like, I feel that being a museum guide was one of the first curatorial schools, because it really helps you to understand like audience behavior, and how there's a plurality also within those audiences, So the audience is not one mass group of people who have one single opinion, But there are many audiences, and it's quite plurified. So what might be a great exhibition for a specific community might not well as be for the other, So I think what is important is also not to fall into populism, And do crowd-pleasing exhibitions, thinking that, as you said, the traffic of a show immediately signifies success or greatness. No, maybe I'll leave it there.
I agree with that because especially when we look at how the government, especially the Hong Kong government, how they justify their existence or their greatness, they always use the traffic to show how great their shows were, which I, of course, do not necessarily agree, and I'm sure Venus will have something to say about that too.
We do have to keep records of all the, like the audience number every day, but I agree with Inti that like audience is not like a homogeneous crowd of people, because whenever, even for artists, for curator, for museum director, or everyone in art, where when you do an exhibition, it's always like, people always think, oh, like, it's like kind of like a mutually exclusive thing, like the audience or like the professional crowd, but it's not this way, because in, say, like in Beijing, like UCC is in 798, like it is the center of it, and 798 is like the third or the second biggest tourist attraction in Beijing, right after Great Wall and the Forbidden City. Maybe better, like it actually has a higher rank than Great Wall. So we have a lot of tourists who are interested in art or not. We have the professionals, like the artists, art historians coming here, and then they're like a very complicated construction of like crowd. And in Shenzhen, there are 5 contemporary artists and no art school, and then like no so-called professional art crowd there. But like every opening, we still have around like 300 people coming. Very, very young like faces that you're not familiar with. And do we say that they're less professional than we are? A lot of them are architects. They do designs. They're in a tech scene. I don't think that they are less professional than we are. So like this, like the art thing and the audience thing is actually not totally like in a contrasting manner. So, and we learn a lot from them. It's not like that kind of very diplomatic saying, oh, we learned a lot from our audience. We did learn a lot from them. Like some of the workshop about like land, and there are actually government officials from the Land Related Bureau coming and gave us some comments that, we actually never thought about this kind of things. So, and it's like it's like to imagine or encounter these audiences, like the way of learning to do shows.
It's great to have interaction. I think interaction is very important. So can we take questions from the floor? So does anyone have any questions for our panelists?
Sorry, I just wanted to add something.
Oh, okay.
No, because maybe also in relation that, because we have also a critic as our moderator and a journalist, like writing is a very essential part of making this mythologization that I mentioned of certain exhibitions, because as exhibitions are written about throughout the years, there's more and more information about them, no? So the Documenta that are remembered, they're not only remembered by word of mouth or remembered by the participants who were there or the audience who actually visited, but it is the writing about them that has made them into what for some people consider great exhibitions. Again, the idea of greatness is relative for some people. Now that I talk of Documenta, I remember when I was studying art history in art school in Colombia, it was the first time that Doris Salcedo, the Colombian artist, was participating in Documenta in 2001. And because of that, the art community heard for the very first time that this exhibition existed, like, because it was on the press, it was in the news, like, it was announced like that, like, first Colombia in Documenta, the Olympics as the populist journalism puts it, no, the Olympics of the art world. But for many of the art community, that local art community, it didn't exist in the collective imagery. And a lot of artists, art teachers that were giving us class at that time went for the very first time to Castle. They came back, and I remember being in Bogota, and I went to like 5 or 6 lectures of Documenta, basically people showing their like slideshows of their camera, like not, I mean, back then there wasn't like phone camera, but like their small digital cameras, and narrating their discourse and how they perceive the exhibition, all in different ways. And that created a myth, no? It created this myth like, well, this Documenta really felt like it's a Documenta of the third world. It felt like that. That was the discourse about Documenta 11. And because it had significant amount of artists outside of Europe and the US historically, and that's still the main narrative. And this situation not only happened in Bogota, like it happened in Congo, it happened in Mexico, no? And that Documenta became very important for a very big field of the art world. Then a Documenta that I personally don't think that was meaningful, maybe the Documenta of Carol and Christoph, I mean, meaningful meaning that it just became, I don't know, festivalization of a Documenta. It was very successful for another art world, and that's why I insisted in my brief introduction that there's not one art world. It's a plural ecology. There are art worlds, and for many people, the Documenta that I thought wasn't great was a very successful Documenta. I don't know how I ended up this, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, but
it was about the writing, yeah. And the writing, the symposiums, ritualizing the memory of an exhibition is what makes also those exhibitions great. They were great in themselves, but we remember them for being great because we are ritualizing their existence by remembering them, either in a classroom, a symposium, a conversation. No?
From the audience, I want to say something based very much in what Inti was saying, all the way on the back. But
okay,
hi. Hi, the voice is what is important. Inti was saying that the art that is related to history is very important, but I also saw by the other panel members that sort of having a way to measure how successful an exhibition is by the number of people, it's important for museums or for galleries. So going back to the point of Doris Salcedo, which is your example, Doris Salcedo 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago made this gigantic contribution of getting a whole city together to piece up fabrics across a huge square and to write the names of all the people that have been lost in the violence of that country in ashes. So to give a sense of remembrance that those names will not be forgotten even though the wind may blow those ashes away. So how do you guys see that in terms of art that happens in huge spaces that are public, art that are just driven by an artist but engaging any type of public that may have art knowledge or not?
Well, yeah, this is a broader question, but maybe just for the sake of the audience, people who don't have the reference so clear of Doris Salcedo, you might have seen what's it called? The crack work that she did at the Turbine Hall at the Tate. No, it's this artist who cracked the floor, and I think that's the most global known image of her work. I don't know, I think that's a wider discussion to have specifically on that work. There are many aspects about it. But I guess you're trying to talk about more like artworks that are happening directly on the street and that have a participative engagement, regardless of the difficulties of the specificities of Salcedo, but I would open it more to this. I think the discussion comes for how if the works that are literally happening on the street with masses of people, are they immediately great because they happen in the public domain?
So, any thoughts?
I think a great exhibition always involves good writing or a good statement, but a good statement is not enough. And I think audience has the right to appreciate and enjoy an exhibition to a different extent at any level. For example, I can immediately think of, come back to Hong Kong from Documenta, a public art exhibition I appreciate a lot, staged by Amplus, called Inflations, curated by Tobias Berger, which features several big, gigantic, inflatable sculptures by Chinese artists such as Tate and some international artists. It's crowd-pleasing, and it has reported amazing figures. But I think it's a great exhibition. And I went with my kids, 2-year-old kids, went with my parents, 60-year-old, and each of us had a great time there. Of course, me, because I work in art, go back and read the statement, the rationale behind the exhibition, the reason of the selection of the work and the artist. So I appreciate it at a different level, but it doesn't mean other people who had less knowledge in art can't enjoy it. So I think great exhibition can be crowd-pleasing. It doesn't have to be, but it can be.
I would say different. It depends on the nature of the show. So of course, certain shows would be crowd-pleasing, but I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It depends on who you want to reach and how, and the purpose of your show. Like, why do you want to stage this particular show in the first place? I'm afraid we're running out of time, so we have to end this discussion here. But we can continue our discussion from this stage. But thank you so much for coming here to this session today, and thank you for our panelists.